long part of the Gospels of Matthew and Luke both. It is a body of teaching, not just of theology, but a teaching of how to live if one decides to be a follower of Jesus. Last week we read the Beatitudes, which is a very much beloved piece of biblical literature, and spoke a bit about what the Beatitudes were. And that in both Luke and Matthew, even though the wording is slightly different, the meaning is still the same. The Beatitudes were not so much ethical teachings as they were eschatological promises. Now, eschatology is a study of end times, or the study of that revelation and that revolution from one way of being to a new way of being, to a new age of understanding, to a new age of spiritual living. Okay? So it wasn't about be poor, be righteous, be this, be that. It was, this is God's promise to you. If you are poor, you will be filled in the kingdom of God. Okay? If you are downtrodden, you will be lifted up. If you are, oh gosh, no, they're gone now. But the idea being that whatever you are suffering in this time is to be alleviated, is to be relieved, okay? So what he's done is he set up a foundation. This is the way life is going to be in my kingdom, in my reign, in my spiritual realm. Not just a spiritual experience, but an incarnation of spirit into the lives of people. An incarnation of my spirit into the lives of the poor, the hungry, those who mourn, those who seek right. It's all coming back to me now. Yeah. Those who seek righteousness, okay? That all those things that we need in our lives, all those things that we search for, all those things that we desire will come to us in the reign of Christ. Okay? Furthermore, the laws of the Jewish people, because Jesus was Jewish, and remember this, Matthew's is a Jewish gospel. Luke was a Gentile, and he was Greek, and his is the gospel that was written for the benefit of the Gentiles coming into the Christian community. Matthew's gospel was written for the Jewish community, the earliest church, okay? And so there's still this need to understand Jesus in the context of Jewish history. That Jesus is the fulfillment of the Messianic promise and Messianic prophecy. So if you sit down to read through Matthew a lot, you will find a lot of references to Jesus' life, teachings, activities, movements, to be in order to fulfill the word of the prophet who said this and this and this and this. So Jesus, his actions and his life are fulfillment of prophecy. So at one point when Jesus has talked about how we live in the community of faith as salt and as light, he then goes on to say, I have not come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have come to fulfill them. And that's Matthew's message. I have come to fulfill everything that you have read in temple and heard in temple from the time you were this big. It's all there and it's all in Jesus. Okay. So why all this talk about salt and light? There's a lot of temptation to take this forward. In fact, I was reading one commentary that said that you could also interpret light as being the opposite of heavy, and that Jesus makes us lighter and lifts us up. And I went, no, because that Jesus was talking about. We have to take this back to the time that these words were being said, and why they were being said, and the context. Okay? Now, let's go back to the Hebrew people released from slavery in Egypt and wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, learning how to come together and be a people in the wilderness. You can't be a people in your own on your own land if you can't be a people in the wilderness. Okay? So if you're going to go on a long journey, say 40 years, and you need some food, how are you going to preserve it? You're going to salt it. Think about jerky, think about meat, think about how meats have been preserved through the years, through the ages. Salt is huge in that. And also, as Jesus talks about this, he says salt gives food flavor. And when it loses its saltiness, it's no good to you. And it's probably no good in preserving food either. In fact, until I read this line, until I sat down and read this last week, I kind of went, does salt actually lose its flavor? Does anyone know? I have salt in my cupboard that's been there for months, years. It's still salty. And I don't know, I thought if it sits in your cupboard long enough, if you pass it on to your children and they pass it on to, I don't know. Does it ever lose its saltiness? But evidently there is an experience of that in the biblical times. And Jesus refers to it. So what good is salt if it's not salty? And what good are we if we are not us in Christ? If we are not us filled with light? What good are we if we are not who we were truly meant to be? Which means we don't bring edge to life. We don't bring depth of flavor to life. We don't bring the capacity to preserve what we need to survive if we don't hold on to that quality. Okay? Yes. Secondly, what is the purpose of being light? This is not a trick question. What is the purpose of being light? To banish darkness. So you can read. So you can sew or quilt. So you can write. So you can cook. So you can use your salt. Can't find it in the darkness. What is the purpose of being light? It's to be the opposite of dark. And like he said, what would be the purpose of lighting a lamp if you're just going to put a bushel basket over it? Number one, in those days, it was oil lamps, and you don't give the light oxygen, it's going to go out. And number two, you got to be really careful with oil because it's not quickly renewable. Okay? It was a huge source of light energy in those days. It was all they had. The only fuel for their fire, for their light. But you'd had to take care of that stuff because you can run out. It would be a waste of oil to burn a lamp and then throw something over it. It's a waste of light to have it and not put it out there and shine it in whatever way you feel called to shine it. So Jesus is saying that the fulfillment of the law and the prophets is up to each of us to take on this challenge to be salt, to be light, to shine in the darkness. And believe me, this was a time of darkness. I was thinking back over the history of the nation of Israel, and even as it is lived out today, that this was a people that ended up in Egypt in slavery, traversed wilderness for 40 years so they could finally cross the Jordan into the land that was promised to them. And I'm sure that by the time Jesus comes on, they're going, God, but we've been in exile forever. When have we owned our land and lived in it with joy and deep gratitude and satisfaction without being under constant threat of invasion and exile? The entire body of prophetic writing in the Bible, in the Old Testament, is addressing people in exile, people under attack, people who can't live in peace in their own country. And what did the prophets say? Let's think about Isaiah. And a lot of these prophets, think about Amos. He was one ticked off guy. Think about Jeremiah. The entire book of Lamentations, that was Jeremiah. He was sad about the plight of Israel. And basically the message is, when you turn away from God, God can't help you. When you turn your backs, there's nothing God can do. Creator of the universe, sovereign of all that is, can only help you if you say, yes, help me. If you decide, we're good enough, we've got our rituals, and we've got our righteousness, and we've got our prayers, and we know what to do, and we can live in the land of Baal, and we can live in the land of Beelzebub, and why not marry their women? Why not bring a few gods in? We're pretty open-minded, we're good. No. There's only one. There's only one creative energy. Now, it will form in many ways. It will form through nature. It will form through the unfolding of the entire cosmos, which is endless. And it will unfold in our lives and in our hearts. But what happens is, when we take that principle of having been created in the image of God, male and female, created them. By the way, you should go back and read that story, because God always refers to God's self as we. Let's do this. Let's do that. And we created this, and we're going to create that. We. That's reflection. Take that away. Take it home with you and think about it. Anyway, the idea being that we as beings in consciousness of self, consciousness of the dynamics of human interaction, consciousness of personal growth, personal transformation, personal call to go out into the world. In that regard, we are the image of God, not just creations of God, but images of God. God presence, God self, God conscious in the world. And so, Jesus says, I have come to fulfill the law, which is the Torah, which is the 10 Commandments and the 613 others, okay? And the prophets. So all of that is still alive and well. All of that is still vital to our understanding of who we are. And that is from where we live. And if you go back and you start reading those verses, and it's tedious, it takes a lot to stay with it, with your eyes open and your mind alert. But I was going back through it this week, given the events in the United States and in Quebec. And the laws in Leviticus about the foreigner in your land, those were so powerful for me this week, about how you regard the foreigner in your land. When you are a nation that lives in a kind of a wilderness landscape where resources can be scarce, or you are a Bedouin or nomad community, hospitality is so important. Caring for the foreigner within your borders. Caring for the refugee who comes within your borders. Okay? This is the law that Jesus fulfills and calls each of us to fulfill. And this is the prophets who consistently reminded that wayward people that this is what God has called you to, and when you do not do what God has called you to, guess what? You get to be a foreigner in someone else's land. You get to be a refugee. So Jesus says, I have come to fulfill. I have come to be the law and the prophets. I have come to show you how to be the law and the prophets. You're going to be salty. You're going to be the punch of flavor. Anybody ever eaten too much salt at a time? Or something that's too salty? Okay, that's what we have to be. And we have to be light. And final statement I will be about light is, go back to Genesis. And go back to the Big Bang. What is the first thing that was created? Light. God said, let there be light. Light begins it all. So when we become light, we become the beginning of everything that can be new, that can be edgy, flavorful, shocking, but that can be loving and caring and welcoming. This is our call. You are the salt of the earth, the light of the world. Now just get out there and do it.
So I feel the only appropriate response to that is not a little meditative piece, but to sing This Little Light of Mine. So please stand.
Number 677.